Hey everybody, it's your guy, Who is Josh G, sitting here with Lee Perman Esquire, prominent bankruptcy attorney here in New Jersey. And I got a question for you. What are bankruptcies? I've heard about a Chapter 13, a Chapter 7, a Chapter 11. Can you explain the differences for our audience?
Yeah, simply, if we try to define the different chapters, let's start first with Chapter 11 and eliminate it, because for consumers, it's not something we typically talk about. A Chapter 11 is mainly designed for a business. Sometimes an individual has debts over a certain limit. So most of the time, we're not talking about Chapter 11 for regular consumers. In the context of people who are regular working individuals who have financial distress, we're talking about Chapter 13 versus Chapter 7. Chapter 13 is usually, I would say, designed in three circumstances. One, you're behind on a car or a mortgage and you need to stop a foreclosure, stop a repossession. Two, you earn over a certain level of income. There's something called median income. So in New Jersey, median income for a household of one, just as we use an example, is about $79,000. We're high, one of the highest states. So if you're earning above that, you may have to file a Chapter 13 where you're going to repay rather than 7, which we'll talk about in a minute. And the third reason you might file a Chapter 13 versus a Chapter 7 is you have assets over a certain limit and you don't want those assets liquidated. So if you have a home, for example, simplest example, and the home is worth $100,000 and you have a mortgage of $25,000 or $30,000, you would, in that example, you'd have too much equity for a Chapter 7. You don't want your home to be sold by the trustee, so you would file a Chapter 13, which segues me into 13. And a 13, like we said, repayment bankruptcy. Chapter 7, no one's paid back. So Chapter 7, you're under a certain level of income, okay? You're under the median income. You might not own real estate, and typically your assets exceed your income. You would file a 7. It's a relatively straightforward process. It's called a liquidation bankruptcy, but 98% of the time, property is not liquidated. Why? Because if it was going to be, people would move into Chapter 13, but that's not typically explained that way. Yep. So most of the time, unless people want certain assets to be sold by the trustee, and there are reasons for that, people will elect the chapter based on their assets and their income. So the takeaway, higher income, more assets, you need a repayment plan, Chapter 13. No real estate, under the median income, your expenses exceed your income, Chapter 7. Does that make sense?
That does. I think you simplified it down and made it very clear for our audiences that there's different remedies, but most importantly, it's not for you to figure out. You need to come in and have a consultation, and Mr. Perman will direct you on what is most applicable to your situation.
It's an important point, and you reminded me of something. Over the last 60 or 90 days, we've seen an uptick in our little practice with respect to people who try to file bankruptcy on their own. Now, I'm not suggesting that you can't get to the finish line on your own, but you certainly wouldn't stitch yourself up on your own. And you're not going to call the doctor and ask the doctor on the telephone if you have a stomachache. What's the doctor going to say? God forbid you have stomach cancer, or maybe you had bad Mexican food. I don't know till you come in. It's the same way for us. We have to be able to diagnose the issue, understand what's going on. But my larger point is that in the past 60 days, we've taken over 2 cases for people who filed on their own because the trustee was about to sell their house and they didn't understand how to set their case up, what the exemptions were, which chapter to elect. So those things are critical. You can lose valuable property simply by not going to, and most lawyers accept payment plans. Both of these individuals would have been clients that we would have been happy to put on a payment plan. They just automatically thought that they would try to do it on their own. So in both cases, we're able to help the clients save, in one case, save a home from being sold. In another case, get them some money when the whole house got sold.
That's fantastic. And exactly, folks, who you work with matters, and you want to work with an attorney who's actually going to treat you as a human being and understand your situation. That yes, sometimes life does happen and cause a derailment. With working with Mr. Perlman, we try and get that train right back on the track as soon as possible and preserve your assets, your equity, and help you reestablish yourself financially. Because listen, everybody has a hiccup here and there. Nobody's perfect. It's nothing to be ashamed about. The only time you need to be ashamed is if you try to hide it, wait till the last minute and try and do it yourself. At that point, that's a recipe for disaster. You're exactly what you said, and I think that's a great thing when you said about stitching yourself up. You're financially hemorrhaging. You are bleeding out If you have an emergency like that, you're not going to patch yourself up. You're going to go to the emergency room, see a doctor, and get help. Same thing for a professional. You're going to go see an attorney and get the right help and preserve your equity and pretty much your legacy.
Remember, most attorneys, including myself, and this is not just about me, my fellow colleagues, everyone in the bankruptcy bar offers a free consultation. It's usual and customary. So there's a free consultation, and my firm offers payment plans. Some firms do not. But the point is there's flexibility and accessibility to get into the bankruptcy system relatively easily without trying to go ahead and do it on your own.
There you go. There you heard it, folks. So don't make those assumptions. We all know what happens when you assume something, right? Don't need to say it. So if there's a free consultation, come in. It's going to be confidential. I have obviously attorney-client privilege, right? So, have the conversation and prepare accordingly, because we all know what happens. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail.
Absolutely, 100%.